After 2 failed attempts to create a clutch, I tried another simple system with pulleys and an elastic band, which proved successful. As a large pulley wheel rotates, the motion is transferred by the elastic band to a smaller pulley wheel, but if the smaller pulley wheel is blocked from rotating, in this case by a connector limiting rotation to 180 degrees, the elastic band will slip, preventing damage to the mechanism. Having built a test rig to move the shuttle and turn the pulleys, I wanted to see how it would handle swinging the wrecking ball. Admittedly, I hadn't built the strongest rig, but it was really struggling with the weight, so I decided to remove the back half of the ball. I wasn't sure how stable this structure would be, but thankfully it held together well, and there was a noticeable difference in performance. I'd spent a little time before the next stream designing a stronger and more efficient shuttle to carry the ship and the wrecking ball, and having found the perfect candidate for the bar on the chain to catch and turn the ship, I now needed to correctly synchronize the chain with the movement of the shuttle. If I was to use a 40:1 ratio to move the shuttle, then I'd need to recreate the same ratio ending with a 16-tooth gear winding the chain, as other gears would be too wide or too narrow for the bar to catch that ratchet wheel. Unfortunately, as often happens, I got completely confused with my calculations and spent most of this stream getting nowhere. I knew that the chain was effectively behaving like a gear in this scenario, with 1 full pass of the chain equating to 1 rotation of a gear, except there are 2 bars per chain link, so a 20-link chain would match a 40-tooth gear. I had previously worked this out for the last test rig, but somehow I'd forgotten the magic formula. After a few attempts, I finally worked out the correct way to synchronize the shuttle and the chain, but at a 1:1 ratio the chain was moving too slowly for the bar to turn the ratchet wheel before the shuttle began moving away. Between live streams, I rebuilt and refined the rig, and got it successfully working at a basic level. It still needed a lot more strengthening and refining, but as a proof of concept this was looking good. In order to strengthen the framework, I decided that I would stack Technic frames behind the backdrop and run connectors through it, similar to the floating platforms. I'd still need various connectors in front of the backdrop, so I was hoping I could disguise them with matching colours. Limiting myself to dark brown connectors was a challenge in itself, as I struggled to align connection points, then found I needed to widen the frame, otherwise bricks wouldn't fit to cover any cutout in the backdrop. The newly built framework now didn't align at all with those Technic frames, but it wasn't a simple case of shifting the frames over, as that would cause a collision with the frame holding the Scotch yoke system that moves the shuttle. I could remove one of the lift arms that the Scotch yoke system pushes against, but I'd have to replace the other with a shorter flip-flop arm, as standard arms are slightly narrower in one orientation. It may not have much of an impact on how far the ship moves, but there is a more noticeable difference in the swing of the wrecking ball. I realised at this point that I actually needed to move the supporting Technic frames in the opposite direction to what I was thinking. Whoops. While physically building the design, I found that the chain for the wrecking ball was rubbing against the lift arm across the shuttle's frame, so I had to remove the arm and find alternative ways to support internal components. Then after building up the frame to support the ship and wrecking ball, I found that the ball would sag, causing the clear lift arm to collide with the adjacent vertical drive shaft. It seemed the only way around this would be moving the drive shaft, and thankfully it appeared that I could swap both the ratchet gear input and the drive shaft to the opposing frames. Reconfiguring connectors at the top of the shuttle wouldn't be quite so easy, as I found myself with a gap that couldn't be filled with existing dark brown pieces. I did consider a single reddish-brown filler, but these things never sit right with me, so I instead wondered whether I could lower the mountains of the backdrop and use blue connectors. This worked out much better due to the larger selection of blue parts, though I had to make use of a couple of older connectors. I felt that the pillar supporting the wrecking ball could use some extra support, as it was currently freestanding. I couldn't see any easy way of connecting the pillar to the frame though, so I wound up removing it in favour of a cleaner appearance. There was, however, an issue, as the wrecking ball's axle was only supported at the rear, causing the front end to sag and the lift arm to now collide with the chain. I thought I could overcome this by adding a few extra connectors to the front of the frame, but once installed, found that the chain of the wrecking ball now collided with them at the peak of its swing. So I somehow needed to extend out the frame without placing connectors in the way. I couldn't really go over the top as there would be a chain connecting the two gears, but I couldn't see any other way of supporting everything in such a confined space, until I deleted the connector under the ship and moved that perpendicular connector closer. This sparked an image of a small L-shaped connector, but I can never recall the orientation of its pinholes. Fortunately, the connector was just what I needed, and better yet, it came in blue. Slightly less fortunately, I had my top chainring further up the lift arm than in the design, causing a collision with the new connectors, so I had to replace the outer thin lift arms with some uncommon blue half bushes that only made an appearance in one Lego set. But at least they weren't black. The new design worked perfectly, with the wrecking ball now clearly missing both the chain and the drive shaft, though I was a little concerned about the amount of slack in the chain. Starting the next session, I'd been wondering whether it might be possible to introduce a delay in the movement of the shuttle, to give more time to turn the ratchet wheel and ship before making its return journey. I theorised that if I used curved lift arms, there would be just a little extra time between the Scotch yoke's arm breaking connection with the first lift arm and making connection with the second lift arm. This would only work in one direction, but I know there are ways of converting a two-way input to a one-way output. Another possible solution would be reducing the length of time that the bar on the chain was in contact with the ratchet wheel. Currently the chain wrapped most of the way around the gear underneath the wheel, but I could change the chain's shape to be more open, or even a straight pass. I set up a test rig with a more open design, which did make a small difference, but it was still just a little jerky. The slack in the wrecking ball's chain was still bothering me, and it would only be made worse with the weight of the ship on the frame, so I decided to add a couple of extra support legs. They made absolutely no difference to the chain, though they did help support the ship, so I instead used a couple of idler gears to stretch the chain out. The new legs would need blending in with the colours of the background to disguise them. I'd found that the closest match for the two module axle connectors I was using was dark azure, which did get me questioning again whether I'd be better off using it for the watercolour, but then I thought as I'd already had a positive experience using Go bricks for the log bridge, maybe I could use them here. I found they had exactly what I needed, though there'll be a bit of a wait to see how they look. One final addition was a lift arm across the front of the supports to prevent the wrecking ball colliding with them, and I got my first proper look at how the whole thing would perform.